Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a re-recording of the Mill Bend Update. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. This is a virtual community forum brought to you by Redwood Coast Land Conservancy. I'm John Walton, and I'll be the host for today's re-recording of the forum. The goals of this forum are pretty straightforward. We're going to introduce you to RCLC. Now, I realize for many of you, this is a reintroduction, but for some of you, mostly what you know about us is about Mill Bend. Then we're going to do the Mill Bend update. That's the big story of the day. And Kathleen Chasey will give you all the latest on our current thinking and development about the project. We introduced and will continue to have available a community input survey. And we'll ask that you take the time to take this survey, and we'll provide a link during the course of this presentation. Now, how the forum will work, or how it worked before, the same would be true. The microphones were muted. People could still ask questions using the chat function. Questions were addressed at the end of the forum. Now, about RCLC. It was founded in 1992. Specifically around the Gualala Bluff Trail. Some of you may know that saga that went on for some time. We serve the coastal watersheds from Navarro to Jenner. Our mission is to preserve, restore when necessary, protect, and a very important aspect, provide public access so that you all can visit the beautiful lands that we store. Just an FYI, because of Mill Bend and all the activity that's generated, the board has tripled in size. It went from 4 to we're now at 12. A lot to be done, especially with Mill Bend. So just a little bit about RCLC's coastal access points if you haven't visited them. Fern Gulch is just below Bowling Ball Beach, about maybe a mile. A beautiful little pocket beach. Cook's Beach, probably our most visited property, is about across from St. Louis. The Bluff Trail in town, now that may be even more visited because local and visitors alike can be found walking along that trail along the river, looking at the river otters and the other wildlife that could be seen. If you haven't done the Bluff Trail in town, give yourself 20 minutes to relax at some point. Take that walk. And then the star of our show, of course, Mill Bend, you know where that is by now. Just a couple of the highlights of what you might see visiting our properties. This is a shot above Fern Gulch, Cook's Beach with a beautiful sky. The Bluff Trail, this is probably shortly after the river breached into the ocean. And if you are ever watching for that to happen, the Bluff Trail is kind of an ideal spot to watch for. And of course, here's the star of today's show, Mill Bend. So I'm going to turn over to Kathleen, who will give you the latest and greatest. Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, let me get you set up, Kathleen.
And I am going to share my screen. All right, there we go. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar today. As John said, we are re-recording it. We had a little technical glitch, and so here we are again. So if it sounds a little different for those of you that actually heard it on August 30th, it's because it is different. My hair is different. I have different earrings in. John's hair is part of the same, but everything else is all good. So like you said, the star of the show, Mill Bend. But before I start on the yesterday, today, and tomorrow, for those of you that don't know, Mill Bend made it to television. And the reason for that is Sonoma County Regional Parks, who is a great partner right across the river from Mill Bend, invited us to participate in their segment on Open Road with Doug McConnell, which is on television in the Bay Area. Used to be called Bay Area Backroads. And it just shows that the great partnership with Sonoma County Regional Parks and how important the Mill Bend property is. to the coast here and to Californians. So Millbend yesterday. Some of you may have seen a couple of these older photos, but for those that haven't, they are just totally cool. So this is looking south toward the town of Gualala. You can see the large mill building, and coming out of it, train tracks, and here's actually the mill band and the gravel bar beach that we all know. And speaking of the trains, this is what in the heyday the trains system looked like. And what's very interesting about the trains, and really about the history in general on Millbend, is the more we know about it, the better we know a little bit more about the actual property itself. And what this says to us is there's some really nice little flat beds. Can you see my cursor here? Flat beds on the property that, for those of you who've heard Rails to Trails programs, it makes a very easy way to actually put trails in. And that could very likely be one of our goals for this property. And then here is actually looking at the old state highway going across. So this will be going across like in between Gualala Arts and the Millbend property, going over to what is now the campground over in Sonoma County Regional Park. So this, unfortunately, this bridge fell down in 1906 for obvious reasons, was rebuilt, but it's too bad it wasn't still there. It'd be a great link for the California Coastal Trail. But maybe there is some opportunity at this location. Another interesting thing about this slide is obviously the river was a bit deeper. There's this nice little sailboat sitting here in the middle of the river. And then here is the train on its way in the direction of going back to Millbend, but it had gone all the way downriver in the direction it's facing right now. Another historical photograph. This is Ladies' Day on the Gualala, and so the steelhead and salmon were in abundant supply, and that bringing the coho salmon back and increasing good habitat for the steelhead is definitely one of our goals. And then this is a much more current historical photo, but this is like flying. If we were an eagle, we're flying above, let's say, the Gualala Art Center, which is down below here, hasn't been built yet. But you can see Highway 1, it's in. It's probably pretty brand new in this photograph. So we know it's in the late 50s. This is Gualala Redwoods Inc., excuse me, who the property was purchased from. And this is in its heyday. It was a very state-of-the-art mill. For those of you that are familiar with the cemetery, here's the cemetery. The little houses that still exist are right here, and the rest of this is begun to revegetate. But you can see how large of a production it was at this time. But then let's take us to Millbend today. So, but Millbend, last September, the Alimal Foundation, our very generous interim funder, who put up $1.8 million for us, that bought us the time to be able to do the fundraising, and has been holding the property. And without the Alimal Foundation, we would not be listening to this webinar today. It was outstanding what they did for us as a community. So those that are familiar with the full campaign, or at least with this totally cool little banner that we put together, the redwood tree banner that's hanging down by the Gualala, the bridge over the Gualala River on Highway 1, and we've been filling it in. But the $2.7 million campaign is $1.8 million in acquisition funds. So that is to reimburse the Alimal Foundation. It also includes a $600,000 stewardship fund that is required of land conservancies in order to maintain and steward a property in perpetuity. And then we also pursued a $300,000 site assessment and planning grant. So that made up our full campaign. And as you may also know, but just to catch everybody up, we wrote 3 grants and we're 3 for 3 in our success rate. So pretty satisfied with our batting average. Starting at the bottom, we received a $1 million U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grant for national coastal wetlands. That $1 million is the highest amount that the federal government gives, and we received it. That's another indication of how important the Gualala River estuary is. We also pursued an $845,000 California Natural Resource Agency environmental grant and received it. And then we pursued with the State Coastal Conservancy a $320,000 planning grant. So that put us well on our way to filling in our redwood tree. And we would like to thank the more than 250, probably close to almost 300 individual donors who have contributed toward the Millbend Conservation Project. And a special shout out to some of the major donors that we've listed here, and including Gualala Arts, the Sonoma Land Trust, and Resources Legacy Fund for giving us some very significant funds to put us well on our way. And where are we today? Well, when we first started putting together this webinar and this slideshow in early August, we had just under $50,000 to go. And at the time of completing this webinar package, we had $11,000 to go. And since you know we are actually recording this a little while later, we are down to less than $3,000 out of $2.7 million. So everyone give themselves a nice pat on the back for all of the energy that was created around Millbend and all of the donations that I'm sure many of you have offered to the project. And if you have a little bit more and want to go ahead and help us finish this off, you are very welcome. And as far as partners, so this particular project has been going on for 3 years to try to, since Cindy Kennedy Real Estate put the for sale sign up on the property, and sitting here today in September 2020, we have amassed a lot of partners who are very excited to help us with the Millbend Conservation Project, not only with funding, but with technical knowledge and volunteer hours, etc., in order to take this project to completion. So here is a beautiful slide, one of my, in particular, favorites of all of the partners we have acquired through this journey. And so now let's look at Millbend tomorrow. And when I say Millbend tomorrow, we started it a couple of days ago. And what I mean by that is John Walton, Laura Baker, and I walked the property, all 113 acres of it, with the scientists from PCI, which is Pernesky Chatham. They are an environmental consulting group out of Sebastopol. They were highly recommended to us by the State Coastal Conservancy to help a small land trust like ourselves help the community to understand the property through site assessments, the opportunities, the constraints, and how we can actually realize our vision and what that vision is. So we just actually started this last Wednesday and Thursday. But before I actually leave this slide, I want to just make sure that we're all on the same page on what is Millbend. So looking at this particular map, all of this bright lemon yellow are the boundaries of the parcels. There's actually 4 parcels. 3 parcels are on the west side of Highway 1. Here's the View Restaurant. Here's the end of the Gualala Bluff Trail, which is the California Coastal Trail that winds just on the back half of Gualala. So it goes straight from there to the larger parcel here in Mendocino County that most people would recognize as Mill Bend, you know, where the river takes the bend to go out to the ocean, and where the mills were. So this is where that great big mill building was with the trains coming through. And then there is actually a 14-acre parcel on the Sonoma County side, which is adjacent to the Sonoma County Regional Park that we know as Gualala Point Regional Park. And then there is one single parcel on the east side of Highway 1, which is this one here that you can see. It has one little cutout, which is the Pioneer Cemetery. That is not part of the purchase. You can't actually own a cemetery, a historical cemetery in the state of California, but we can restore it. And then in addition, you'll see this little appendage right here, which is right below Gualala Art Center. And it is the train bed remember we saw the train sitting here. It came from, historically, there was a mill here at China Gulch. The train came through the property here, went through that big mill building, and then went all the way upriver. So, excuse me. So my comment about the train beds being a possibility for an easier transition straight to a trails, that is a possibility. We need to do the full assessments here in order to understand whether that's possible. And I'll get into that in just a moment. So you can see that there is a large forest here. This is a big willow wetland here on the Millbend property. And so as far as what we just kicked off last week, Pronowski Chatham, PCI, is going to focus on 6 areas. And here they are. So it is to connect the California Coastal Trail, right here, to where the Coastal Trail picks back up in Sonoma County Regional Parks and then heads through Sea Ranch. So there is obviously this missing link from here to here that is an opportunity for this project. Another part of this project is to survey all the wildlife and the plants on the full 113 acres. And that is so we understand what our assets are and what our constraints are. And our constraints would be, there is something called an ESHA, E-S-H-A, and that's an environmentally sensitive habitat area. And those require some very careful staying away from or mitigation if you had to get close to it. And so we want to understand that before we actually proceed to put the first 3 feet of the trail in, if that's what we so desire. Another aspect of the project is to restore the estuary, so the Gualala River estuary right here, which is considered a lagoon when the river is closed. That is a very important estuary for a lot of different species, and in particular for 2 salmonid species, which are the type of fish that are born in freshwater, go out into the ocean, get larger, come back into the freshwater, and breed again. And those for us will be the coho salmon and the steelhead. Today, there are no recorded coho salmon still in the Gualala River, but there are steelhead. Another aspect of this project is a restoration of the entire project, but the mill site. So remember that 1950s mill picture, the camera aerial photography was done in this direction, and this was solid piles of lumber and buildings, etc. So even though in the last 60 years, 50, 60 years since the mill has not been there, and the lumber, its piles, etc., the property has grown back, but not in all areas. You can see that there's still some very devastated areas, and even a lot of the screen here is a lot of invasive plants. So there's some restoration to be done. Another aspect is there are 2 buildings currently, for those of you that have been on the property, hopefully on maybe one of our tours that we were able to give last October, November, December, January, before we stopped giving tours with hope of giving them again in the spring, but the COVID virus took care of that opportunity. But there are 2 homes there, here you can see them a little bit closer. Here's Highway 1. There are the two homes. They're old mill houses. One is the Gualala River Watershed Council office, and then the second one, the larger house, was the home of the last forester that worked for GRI who lived on the property. So those two give us the opportunity, because in Gualala town talk, they are two water hookups. So they allow us to, if at some point under another set of big fundraising, we would want to explore a research center, something for education, etc. We noted those on the grants that we have that we applied for, so that we would still have that opportunity. And then finally, we want to be able to improve the community's access to the river. The little road here that the kayak, canoe road that you can drive down and actually be able to put your boat or your picnic, etc., on the gravel bar beach. We would like to actually be able to improve that. So those are the 6 main focus areas of the project as we see them now. So what's first? So what's first is this complete survey of wildlife and plants. So I mentioned ESHAs, environmentally sensitive habitat areas. What we want to know is what's on the property, what's extra special, what's an invasive plant, what needs a major, cleanup of removal of concrete or habitat that, broom is, there's an invasive plant called broom with bright yellow flowers that I'm sure many people listening have them on their property. Those are the types of things we want to understand, where those plants and where the wildlife is, so that we can then better look at some of the opportunities for enhancing the property. In addition to those 2 surveys, we also need to survey the cultural sites and the topography. So the cultural sites are going to be studied through archaeological assessments, including some, there's actually is one pretty large archaeological report that exists today on the Millbend site, because we know that there has been lots of activity by the Native Americans, by the Russians, by the Chinese. This actually is China Gulch. This is the old highway looking back toward Gualala. So we know that there's lots of cultural activity that has occurred. And if you look at this little 1940 topo map of the property, you can see there's no Highway 1 cutting through the property. This is the old state coastal road. This is where Gualala Arts will be someday. Here's a bridge going over that we looked at in that historical photo. The little sailboat was right here. The train started up here and it chugged right through the property here, and then it went all the way up, followed the river bank on a nice bed all the way up to Switchville, crossed Switchville, and went further east through the watershed. So looking at the cultural sites, these kind of maps are helpful because here it shows where all the buildings were. We know that at various times historically on the upland property, that's on the east side of Highway 1. At first the Chinese lived there, then later the lumber mill operators lived there. So a lot of different things have occurred on the property, and we need to fully understand those. As far as topography, that also is going to be very important for a variety of reasons, putting in trails, etc., being maybe one of the easiest ones to understand. But with climate change and sea level rise, we don't want to go through, nor could we, using anybody's funds in the state of California, put a trail in that 20 years from now would be underwater. So understanding the topography and really the hydrology of the site is something that's going to be considered with the site assessment surveys that just began this last Wednesday and Thursday. So with those in hand, then we can start to talk about trails. Now I'm going to review some possibilities for trails, but John referred to that there is a survey available on the RCLC website, which will be noted at the end of this slideshow, where we're going to ask you questions on sort of, do you favor trails, not trails, here, there, you know, a bunch of different questions, so we understand what the community is thinking about this property that now fabulously is in the hands of the community. So I might talk like, well, here's where the trail's going to go, but please keep in mind that this is just a starting point, so we have a basis for actually talking. Now, all of this will be very influenced by all of these plant, wildlife, cultural, and topographic surveys that are going to occur in the next 6 to 8 months. But I will proceed through and hopefully you'll be able to follow along where I am. So I am now, so this particular photo here is looking, here's the View restaurant. The farmer's market would be happening up here. This is the turnout, you know, where the cars sit. You know, momentarily we're going to see this repaved as part of the repaving that's imminent on Highway 1. And right here is the very end of the Gualala Bluff Trail. It ends right here, a nice little bench. And we would like to continue it. Remember, we have that missing link. So here is an aerial view done by Craig Tooley with pilot Dave assisting us. Craig and Dave are instrumental in putting together all the baseline photos of the property, of which these are several of them that are included in this slideshow. And we really appreciate the volunteer hours that they put in to do this. So starting with this photograph right here, if the trail ends right here, you might be able to even recognize that there's a few social trails that would bring you back up to the road. Here they are. I'm trying to follow them with my cursor. So you can see that there is an area of dryness that's flat enough potential where we could continue the Gualala Bluff Trail, the California Coastal Trail, in a southerly direction, heading toward the Millbend Estuary. What is between us, though, is China Gulch, which today is no longer, you know, it's a culvert. There it is. But here's China Gulch. And it is an environmentally sensitive habitat area. For those of you that have been lucky enough, often the river otter family is sitting here or right across the Gualala River on the Sonoma County side. So this is an area that needs to be studied. We also need to figure out how logistically the trail could go from here over to here. And here's another little thing. Here's an old road that went down to Millbend. And this group of actually RCLC volunteers is being taken on a tour of the property in hopes, at the time, we thought we would start to be able to do some cleanup and have more tours, etc. So that's what's happening in this little picture. But they're on a road that continues for a significant little ways down until it actually hits back into Highway 1. But here's another opportunity for a trail. And then for those of you that might be able to see, this is the train trestle bed. At this point, the train was on tall trestles, but the bed of it is running right down here, and it continues all the way into the estuary property. So there's an opportunity here to continue the California Coastal Trail across China Gulch and down toward the estuary property. Another thing I want to point out on this screen, on this particular slide here, is this little area right here that I'm kind of trying to outline with my cursor here. This is actually flat. So Caltrans is going to actually repave the pullout here. They're also going to put in a path or a segment for an ADA path right along this area, along with some ADA parking spaces. I understand they're right here. And this would be a really nice entry to the California Coastal Trail. A nice, maybe it's a possibility for some picnic tables or benches, and really would allow a very friendly view, an excellent view of both the Gualala River estuary lagoon and the regional park, beach and ocean. So some real nice opportunity in this part of the 113 acres. And just another thing I want to point out, this particular home right here is not part of the purchase. It's a little cutout. The property line starts right about here, but there is an opportunity to take the trail to link up the trail to the upland property. And we have requested, actually, Caltrans put in a crosswalk right here at Old State, so that could help ease that. So not approved, but another opportunity to continue the coastal trail on the upland property here. So as now I am looking further toward the mill bend, the actual bend in the river. And here is where, those big buildings were with the trains coming through them. There is also a wildlife pond that is another ISHA, environmentally sensitive habitat area. In fact, this particularly entire parcel is an ESHA because it is a wetlands. So it will be very closely surveyed, so we understand where are the protected species. And very likely the red-legged frogs live right here, so we will be staying away from them. But there's an opportunity. In this mauve color here, this picture was taken by Craig and Dave in January, so the willows are deciduous, so they're this mauve color. But there's an opportunity potentially to take the trail through the willow wetlands and bring it all the way here to the gravel bar beach, or here is the kayak access road, and maybe then take it upriver. So, and then speaking of going upriver, obviously this photograph is a little bit different season. The willows are all green. And that would be to take the train, remember that train, it chugged right through here and went all the way up and all the way up to Switchville. Gualala Arts is probably like right here. So this is all of the Mill Bend property that has been purchased. And there is a relatively flat bench where the train was as it took the logs inland. And some of you that have been on Gualala Arts trails all the way down to the river, you'll know, you may recall that trail right along the river already exists. They've cleaned it up. They have those lovely little switchback haiku trails that take you all the way down to the river. We'll be able to actually hook up with those potentially and take them all the way down to the end of that skinny little strip that's part of the Mill Bend purchase. And here again is those train tracks that can give us some opportunity. Another opportunity could be to try to figure out some kind of a linkage to get back over to Sonoma County and to the California Coastal Trail, which is right here. And it's behind the trees and then goes on, continues on through Sea Ranch, pardon me. And maybe one of those opportunities is to add an attachment. I say this very simply, like it's just add an attachment, but add an attachment to the current Highway 1 bridge for pedestrians and bicyclists. That's an opportunity. We actually have already started that discussion with Caltrans. Obviously something that would be very expensive and way down the road, but not outside of the realm of possibilities. Another opportunity could be to maybe at that location where the old state highway had that old wooden bridge, where that sailboat was underneath, maybe that's an opportunity to put some kind of a bridge access. And there's a few ideas out there that we actually even discussed on our site visit on Wednesday and Thursday with PCI. So there's some opportunities here to further take these trails along and upriver. And then, in speaking about trails, and when you go for grant funding, when typical grantors want to say, well, what do you want to do with the property, and what's your public and educational aspect of the property? Along this millbend conservation, several of the local environmental groups raised their hand and said they would be interested in partnering with us. Interpretive signing along the trail. So that is another question on the survey about your the community's level of interest on that. So you can see all these great river, plant, bird, fish, hydrology, etc., opportunities for education. This particular sign, you may be familiar with it. It's right there at that Caltrans turnout. And this was put there by the Gualala River Watershed Council, who has one of the buildings on the millbend property. So this interpretive signing and education is another big potential part of this project. And then now, to stay on the millbend estuary parcel, I want to talk a little bit about improving community access to the river. So you're likely familiar with, this is the kayak road entrance. This is that gravel road down to the gravel beach. You know, here's the open signs for Adventure Rents, who rents the kayaks down here. And what we would like to, what RCLC, the Land Conservancy, is currently doing is we are in discussions with both Caltrans, Mendocino County, and the California Coastal Commission about putting a gate right here at Long Highway 1. And some of you may recall 4 or 5 years ago, a gate was recently removed. It was a little further down the slope that GRI had on the property because the community wanted to have better access to the gravel bar beach. And RCLC wants the community to continue to have that access with a vehicle. However, some of you may have noticed maybe a month or so ago, there was an ICO article that talked about some of the issues we were having with this access point, and that has been the overnight camping and the vehicles on the gravel bar beach, and probably the most unfortunate part is camping and fire pits and stuff. So we do not want to allow vehicles to be able to stay overnight. So we are pursuing a vehicle-only gate with a pedestrian access point that's always open. And we have already partnered with Sonoma County Regional Parks that when their rangers and ranger aides go and open and close the Gualala Point Regional Park Gate and all those access points in Sea Ranch, they will also open and close at dawn and dusk the new millbend gate. So that is what RCLC is pursuing right now. And you have an opportunity in the survey to comment on that, and we welcome your comments. A little further down, this is the view actually of sometime in June of, this is the gravel bar beach is just beyond this point, but this is the parking area where we've, and then we would want to keep this parking area and improve it and improve the quality of the road. Those of you that have been on the road in the past might know that you could really catch some air if you drove fast enough. There's some pretty spectacular bumps on it. So there is a desire to clean up and smooth out that road. Another of the wish list items would be, after this improved access, and more knowledge of this this access point, community access point to the river, we know it'll get more use, and a bathroom is probably something that we could pursue. Obviously, another very big environmental thing, it would need to be totally contained, but those exist, and that is on the wish list for improvements for the community on the river point. And here is a view of a couple of the fire pits that we saw with camping on the property. There is no camping signage. You will see gates locked at sunset when there is a gate, which will be months away. There is also a second gate that's being pursued. This is just a simple photograph of one of the vehicle gates that's over on Sonoma County Regional Park, but something like this we would like to have right around this point.
Your connection.
It is not good for all the work that we are going to do both in the water and on the land to improve the habitat in the water for the salmon and steelhead. This part of the river system is where the small fish, the juvenile salmonids, grow to get larger. So doing that, donuts into the water, etc., is harmful. So we will be preventing that with a gate at this access point to protect the property. All right, and then moving back up to the upland property on the east side of Highway 1. So here, the eagle with the camera is flying above. Gualala Arts is probably a little bit behind us at this point, behind the pilot, so to speak. But here is Highway 1 looking at Millband with the kayak road. But look at all the forested area that's here. Now, this is also part of the degraded area with some of the old mill foundations that needs to be cleaned up. But, and then here's looking at those two houses, the Watershed Council house, a vacant home from the forester. But there's some beautiful view potential in this area. And there's also some potential for some trails. Again, take a look at the survey and let us know what you're thinking. And just so much focus is on the river and access to the river that it wasn't until about a month ago that the Land Conservancy Board and a few friends went out and took a little tour, a small tour of the 35 acres that make up the 60-acre upland property. And there is a pretty lovely little forest. It's not an old redwood forest because it's you saw those pictures before with all of the stacks of lumber and all the lumber milling that was happening. So this is relatively young trees, and they have been recently logged. However, Mother Nature is doing a good job of coming back, and we could probably do some simple things to help that and help restore this. And there's an opportunity probably for some beautiful forest trails through this property. This intrepid hiker right here, Laura Baker, doesn't realize it, but as she's walking through this old logging road, in a moment she's going to come upon a wetlands that has these swamp harebells. That's what this picture is here. And a swamp harebell is a California listed species, so it would require protection. However, it just does show the level of potential and uniqueness just right here at our front door of maybe some forest trails. And then there is heading right down to the river. So this is the area. So this area here is looking at the river from the Millbend property on the old state road that is between the Gualala Arts property and the Millbend property. That is still old highway, old Caltrans or state highway property, and it already has a trail that's follows the road down to the riverbed. And here's that old train trestle. This is right below Gualala Arts, where they are maintaining the trail. So there's absolutely no reason to maintain that same trail, that old railroad bed trail, all the way to the Highway 1, where there is that Welcome to Gualala sign, where we have our big redwood banner that's we're filling up with $2.7 million worth of needles. Take it all the way there. It would be a relatively at the same grade, easy walk. Now, there's a few things between, there's a alder wetland area, it appears, right near there, and definitely some huge amounts of invasive species that would need to be cleaned up, but there is a real nice opportunity to follow the river. And a lot of these trees that are in the floodplain really are some really lovely, huge trees that have not been logged. And it really is another magical forest, and it's on the Mendocino side. So some great opportunities there. And then it's fun to talk about the trails and the opportunity for the wildlife, etc. But there is a big task to restore the property. Here is an aerial view, similar type of, vantage point of that black and white photograph of the GRI holdings at the time in the 50s. But you can see that there is still some big restoration that needs to be done here. This is that area where the houses were. This is the area right along Highway 1 where during the mill time, at one point, the big conical burners where they burned the sawdust and the extra scrap are. So that area could become a very nice little parking area. There is, the invasive species most well known to those of us here in California is probably pampas grass. This property has its fair share of it, along with broom and fennel. And then here is a little closer up view of one of the really large concrete foundations that would need to be removed, and have this whole area of primarily invasive plants. So this is definitely a multi-year, multi-phase restoration project for just this upland site. But we are when PCI and ourselves looked at the property in a lot of detail, there's already some ideas about the phasing and what can be done, and that is part of the surveys that are happening today. And excuse me, and I wanted to show this map that we included based on one of the homework items from one of the grantors. They said to us, okay, so you'd like $800,000 from the state of California for conservation purposes. What you need to tell us is what areas of the property you are anticipating developing. So we thought long and hard about what to ask for. And we identified these places on the 113 acres. So the first three outlined in blue are the parking areas. So here's that parking area, right along Highway 1 that would allow some, nice incremental parking, with a lovely path down back toward Gualala or back over to the coastal trail that could, help out sort of some of this infamous parking kerfuffle, my husband says across the way from me, opportunity. This might be another area where some nice parking spaces that are relatively close to town, besides the fact trailhead parking and parking for views, or maybe there's a couple picnic tables up here, etc. This is the overflow parking for Gualala Arts. So like when they do Art in the Redwoods in years other than this year, the art exhibit is actually their old parking, where their parking is, and then all of the visitors to the Art Center park here. So it was very important and very clear to us that when we had that very first community forum in fall of 2017, just after the property went up for sale, and asked the community, what's important? Do we want to pursue this? Is there interest? Who wants to help? One of the very clear messages was preserve that parking, overflow parking for Gualala Arts. And then as we looked at a couple slides ago, there is that parking along the kayak road so that you can more easily drag your boat to the beach or your picnic basket, etc. So we would want to preserve that parking. The other development, quote unquote, items that we identified were the two houses, because here's the two water hookups, and said that those houses, those two water hookups, one, we would like, a property of this size is really going to need an on-site caretaker. This is a big park project, and we probably need eyes and help on the ground at all times. So we have worked with Gualala Arts to split a caretaker that would live on this property with them. The other water hookup could be that eventual education outreach research center. So an opportunity for some addition, a future new building at this point. All right, and then so we've talked about trails and restoration, and really one of the other keystone pieces of this project is restoring the estuary and the main stem as it goes all the way up to the north and south fork point for the salmonids. So this is that estuary lagoon that's really important for the rearing of the little fish to be bigger before they actually head out to sea. So, and for those of you that might have been at the forum that we had in December, we had just received a call from one of the fisheries biologists at NOAA who said, oh, I just read in the paper that the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy is working with a funder to buy Mill Bend. Hey, we'd like to help you restore the salmonids in the stream. Well, it knocked us off our chair. It was so exciting. So since then, we have been working with a variety of other agencies that will really partner with us on this really important, very long, needs a bit more study before you'll actually see something happening in the river or on the estuary property. But look at the caliber of who is here. NOAA has responsibility for endangered and threatened species, of which both the steelhead and the coho salmon are. And then California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So Fish and Wildlife are the ones that actually will figure out how to do the work on the ground. And then all the other partners will help us move that forward as we secure funding to make some differences to promote a restored habitat setup. One last little note on this slide, though, is as we've had more publicity out there on Mill Bend, we got a call from the water board, and the water board said, hey, we just heard you're going to work to restore the main stem for salmonids. We want to partner with you on it. So the water board logo here is the most recent logo being added to this. So there again, more proof on how important our beautiful river is to this little community, and how important it is to the agencies who are responsible for helping Californians preserve it and restore it. Very exciting. And we're not starting from the page one. There is a full recovery plan for the Gualala River and for the Gualala River estuary, of which this is a page. It is a very, very long-term goal, but it is the ownership of this is NOAA and NOAA National Marine Fisheries and CDFW, California's Department of Fish and Wildlife. So it's a very exciting to have the Gualala River be a part of that. The Garcia River 10 Mile, Big River are already a part of the coho restoration. And now with the acquisition of these 113 beautiful acres at the estuary, the Gualala River gets to be a part of it too. And so we want to have more shadows like this one right here going up the Gualala River. And with that, one final comment. So if if this project feels like a park project, it's because it is. This is a big undertaking for a small land trust in a little coastal community. However, you can see the level of partnership we have on it. RCLC will have some ongoing funding needs. We have identified that we need a paid project manager. I have personally taken this project with a very large team up to this point, and we're looking for a handoff to a part-time project manager to work with PCI, through the next phase of this project and leading up into the construction phase. So if that tickles your interest at all, you will see information actually about the project manager position on the RCLC website. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to John.
So as has happened throughout this project, RCLC has reached out to the community to find out what does the community think about this. That outreach began in November of 2017. It was a cold November night, and more than 70 people showed up to talk about this opportunity. For the first time in about 70 years, Mill Bend was for sale. Well, the overwhelming opinion at that meeting was that we should buy it, protect it, restore it, and provide more public access. Based on that, a lot of energy formed, and here we are today. We found out at the end of September of last year that the purchase was going to be completed by the Albemarle Foundation, and we celebrated by having a couple of more forums to let the community know. We weren't the only ones excited, that's for certain. Since that time and up until COVID interrupted things, we've been having tours and meetings with anyone interested. The tours were scheduled as requested, and we had plenty. That all had to come to a stop, but we're still doing tours. If you are interested, we'll do small group, socially distanced tours. So go to our website and get in touch if you're interested in a tour. We also had people who contacted us outside of our forums to raise concerns that they had. And we've met and communicated with everyone who's contacted us with a concern to talk with them about their concerns and address them when practical. Now, since we can't meet in person, we'd love to have a big community meeting, say at the community center or the art center or something, and invite everybody and put ideas up and have you all put multi-vote, putting dots on sheets of paper with information, but that's not going to happen. It wouldn't be responsible right now. So we've launched a survey. The survey is up. It is scheduled to be up to September 15th. There's some talk of extending that. Don't know about that, so assume it'll close on the 15th. It's available on rclc.org. If you just go to that page, right there near the top, there's a button to press to get to that survey. Let's see, we talked about that. Now, your input can affect our priorities and what we focus on. That's why we're asking you. We want to know what the community wants. We don't have carte blanche, but we can really influence what happens out there. The survey is open to all. If you've got people, I have friends that come and visit every year. They live in Florida, but they've completed the survey because they're invested too. So encourage all your friends. We will publish the results of the survey when it's complete. I want to talk about constraints one more time for a moment, because we ask everybody what they want and what they'd like to see, and boy, we have creative people in this community, and they come up with all kinds of grand ideas. the realities we live with are that the people who are providing the money for this purchase, they have requirements. We'll give you the money if. And so those are one of the constraints we live with. So for instance, they want us to restore habitat. And if we said, well, up in the upper mill, how about a casino? I'm sure they'd have some words for us. So we can't do anything we want, but we can do things that we believe that most of the community wants us to do. Characteristics of the land. I mean, Kathleen talked about China Gulch, and just putting a trail across that will be challenging. So there are some things that about the sites that will make it difficult for us, but they're constraints. They're not totally obstacles. I think Kathleen already mentioned that you do anything with California money today like this, you have to plan for climate change. We don't want the trail that is really good right now to be underwater in 20 years. She also talked about the cultural and historic features, and many of you in the community know more about these than I do because you've been around. So if remember, people have been here for thousands of years, and there may be places that we come across that are very sensitive to the original people who lived here or the people that came after. Like the historic cemetery is a sensitive area. So we have to honor those. Categorical grant funding simply means it's at different times, grants become available. And we may say that the first thing we want to do as a community is plug in that missing link in the California coastal trail. Well, and we're going to work on that. But if tomorrow the Coastal Conservancy says we've got grants for invasive plant removal, well, that's a huge challenge for us on Mill Bend, especially in the uplands. So we would probably elevate that priority and write a grant to apply for some of those funds, because that funding might not come around again for years. So we will, to some degree, follow the money that's available. And human resources, I want to mention that when we get 2 or 3 grants going at a time, it does get really busy. So sometimes we have some constraints in the terms of the amount of human resources we have to work on a project. This is where volunteering comes in again. If you've got some skills, if you've got some time, you've got some interest and passion about this, contact us, volunteer. We can always use help. If there's something that you think you have to offer, we'll do our best to work with you on that. Okay, so the next time we'll have a forum we anticipate will be in spring of 2021. As Kathleen mentioned, PCI has now actually begun their assessments of the property to develop plans for a master plan for how the property could be developed. Now, they're not going to decide for us. The community will have a big say in this. What they'll do is come up with options. For instance, they might say, well, you could put a coastal trail down along that trestle track and over top of the willows and around that way. Or another way to do this would be to put a coastal trail parallel to Highway 1 up at the highland, right, and make it more accessible. And then we as a land conservancy and you as a community will weigh in and we'll make decisions to a large degree based on what people really want. So look for that, keep your eyes open for that next meeting. I want to thank some people before this is all done. The community support in this project, right from that November night when 70 people showed up, has been tremendous, and we thank you all for that. I want to let you know that our funders pay attention to that. The fact that we can show how much community support we have in petitions and attendance of meetings and donations makes us a more attractive effort to fund. So thank you. Continue that support, please. We have donors near and far. I've tracked them as far away as Florida to Hawaii. We have people donate funds to this. If you can make a donation, we're now, at this moment, we're just over $2,000 away from our goal. Help us close that gap. RCLC volunteers have been huge throughout this. As Kathleen said, there was a large team working on this, and there continues to be. There's lots and lots to do. Consider joining those volunteers. Specifically for today's presentation, I want to name Cheryl Harris pulled together the team to put this on, and she had Ann Hanlon working with her, who did an excellent job helping with slides. Bob Crowder has been part of this team since the concept first came to be. Temper Board has been great with graphics. She also did the map that's going to help you understand what we were asking for in the survey. So thank you, Temper. And Joel Chabin is the tech wizard who's made this all come together. He's the one that had the skills to enable us to tackle this. We're pleased that we've had over 100 people join for the presentation, the original presentation. Stay involved with RCLC, please. We have volunteer opportunities, as I said, and Cheryl Harris is in charge of those. So if you reach out through the website, again, if you have skills, if you have passion, we'll find a way to work with you. Watch for the next community forum. Sign up for our newsletter if you haven't. In addition to the paper newsletter that RCLC has sent out for years, we now have an electronic version that's going to come out more frequently. It'll be shorter, but it'll have current news in it, so keep up with us there. rclc.org, that's where you find everything. Again, donate if you can. This form is going to be available online after we complete today. Take that survey. Again, please take the survey. Let us know what you think. Maybe you think we're completely off base here. The casino is exactly what we need. Let us know that. We want to hear from you. Thanks for your support and participation. Now we're going to go to questions, and we'll answer as many as we can in the time allotted. And Joel Chabin, the tech wizard, will take over from here. Joel?
Hey, thank you, John. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Great. Okay. If you have any questions, everybody out there, please put them in the chat box. Type them in the chat box, and I will address them to our presenters. The first question is from George. He says, will the slides be available after this presentation? Perhaps, and he suggests perhaps on the RCLC website, or perhaps the slide could be shared by Dropbox with those who wish to obtain them. Will your slides be available, Kathleen?
Yes, we are planning on putting this entire presentation onto the RCLC website. So that will make the live presentation available. And hopefully that answers George's question so that other people can share it.
Yeah, I think maybe he wants the slides so that maybe he can show them to other people as opposed to the recording of this presentation.
You mean George doesn't want to hear our voices? All right. Okay, George. I'm sure we can do that. So it's a huge presentation, so we've been sharing it amongst ourselves through Dropbox. So I would say, George, send in particular a request to the RCLC website, and we can probably answer that question, try to make available the Dropbox. I'm guessing a little bit here. Sorry.
Okay, next question. Randall asks, can people visit the cemetery during COVID?
Yes. The cemetery, actually, that little triangle inside the Millband map, the cemetery itself, we are not purchasing. In the state of California, you can't own a pioneer cemetery, which is what this is considered, a historical cemetery. So you can actually park when the gate is open. There is a brand new gate up there. We've had some issues with being left with some old vehicles that cost us a lot of money to actually have towed away. So there is a gate up there with parking, but it has a pedestrian entrance and you can walk right up there. So the cemetery is available all the time.
Okay, Andrea says, Kathleen, thank you for this thrilling presentation. I have learned so much and I'm so hopeful for the future. Thank you. Let's see. And then Anne asks, for Kathleen, what is the process for building all these trails? What is the timeline?
Okay, so that's a loaded question. We thought about putting a slide on that one in there, but we didn't want to like send everybody into like overdrive. But here's the process. So for the next 6 to 8 months, PCI will be doing these surveys of the site so we can figure out what our opportunities are. By early next year, the community will get some choices to choose from. And that be a trail going this way, not this way, et cetera, those kind of things. Once we have that direction, PCI will complete a full master plan for the project. That is what's required of our funders, is there's a master plan. So with that master plan, which would probably be available at the end of 2021 and early 2022, we would then take portions of that, and let's say the trails are probably the very first portion that people want to pursue. We would take that and start to seek funding for it. So I don't want to mislead anybody. You're not walking on a brand new Mill Bend trail into 2022, 2023. And is this community building their own trails? No, we don't have to. Most of the requirements of most of the grants come with the opportunity to reach out to the California Conservation Corps to ask them to put a bid in to put your trails in. So like in the case of Pelican Bluff, which is trails that were just recently put in, those were put in primarily by the California Conservation Corps with some Mendocino Land Trust volunteers and probably some people here in the community. So we'll get an opportunity to absolutely help. Do we need to actually shovel the dirt and lay it down and pull out every pampas grass, plant? No. There's funding to request the actual work to happen. So if you think of this project as phase 1 acquisition, phase 2 planning, we are starting that this week. Phase 3 would be taking elements of the plan, the master plan, and then initiating them. So trail building would probably be phase 3 or a portion of phase 3, maybe along with restoring some of the upland property and et cetera.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I need to say, if any of you have questions, please chat them to me. So far, there are not many questions coming in, which I think is a great commentary to your presentation, Kathleen. So all we have left are, if there's no questions, are just compliments from people. David says, you're doing awesome. And I and Gualala Arts are here. Just ask. We will do what we can. Thank you. And Susan and Gary say, wow, you have done an incredible job. Thank you. And if you want to wait a couple minutes, we can see if anybody has any questions, but it appears that there aren't any.
Joe, can we put this last screen up?
Sure.
So thank you very much for a lot of those kudos. But what I would like to say to Susan and Gary and Dave and others, Andrea, etc. I appreciate you thanking me right now, but there is a much larger group that has worked for 3 years. 3 years? 3 years. 3 years to make this happen. John and I might be 2 little boxes on your laptop screen right now as people to say thank you to, but honestly, there's a really large group of people that helped to write the grants, that offered funding so that we could so that we could actually get an appraisal, so that we actually could do some of the testing that needed to be done. So a really large group, both Friends of the Gualala River, the early board of the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy, there's a big group to say thank you to, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, we have more questions coming in, Kathleen.
Okay.
So the next question is, how do we get in touch for a site tour?
Same thing. They're going to send us a little email through the website, and that will be picked up. And one of us that knows quite a bit about the property will give very small groups, like John alluded to, a tour. And we'd be happy to. We're sorry we can't all be in a like so many things during COVID. Do some of these things in bigger groups, because the dynamic of a group is so exciting to share ideas in person.
Next question is from Paula. She asked, how will you handle the parking area in Gualala?
So when you say the parking area in Gualala, oh, the parking problem?
Maybe that's what she's referring to.
Okay. Well, I think when it comes to the parking problem in Gualala, Frank Demling of Caltrans is the key person we're talking to. So I'm going to punt that one.
Okay, next question is, will cauldrons prohibit parking on the new lot? I'm not sure what the cauldrons are. Do you know what those are?
Caltrans?
Oh, I guess that means Caltrans. Yeah, well, Caltrans prohibit parking on the new LOIT. Maybe it means lot, parking lot.
Okay, so if we're referring to the Caltrans, the pullout area across from where the farmers market is.
Yeah, she means the Cauldrons new lot. Oh, Caltrans new lot by the View.
Yes. Well,
Yeah, restaurant.
That's parking today. It's not going to change. What's going to happen? They're just paving it. To my understanding, they're paving it. They're going to put in a path area on the outside of where the cars physically, closer to the water, a small path so to give an ADA access ability. And then the property that is vegetated all the way down to the river is part of the Mill Bend property. And so the simple answer is the parking doesn't change on the Caltrans pullout area.
Okay, next question is from David. He said, I would love to be part of the cemetery restoration project. How will you coordinate with the Pioneer Cemetery state governance? Please let me know when that project is moving forward. And he's got his contact information here, so we will let you know.
Absolutely. And just a comment on the cemetery. The cemetery is being handled by one of our board members, Kay Martin, who I'm sure is on this call. And so she will make I'm speaking for Kay right now, sorry. Kay will let people know, probably also via the website, when there are some work days to work on the cemetery. It's a delicate process, and she has started doing some of the research on it right now, and we just need to find the four corners of it. So I would say anyone that would like to be part of the cemetery restoration, please send a little email also through the website, rclc.org, so that we can refer your volunteer interest to Kay.
Okay, the next question is from Randall. He asked about the new parking lot. Will it allow overnight parking by campers?
No.
Will Caltrans allow that?
Yeah. Well, so Caltrans is, so if you're talking about the parking lot that is on the upland property, that long rectangle that I pointed to, where the old conical burners were, that parking will be, that gate will be opened and closed dawn and dusk. Similarly, it will not be for overnight parking. We do not have the capability or shall I say desire to handle any type of overnight parking. It's not a campground. We can't allow that.
Yeah,
And
so
I'll point out that much of the reason for that is that there are no facilities. for camping. There are no restrooms available. Luckily, we do have 2 campgrounds very close by and a couple of others not very far away.
Thank you.
Okay, so Kathleen, the Caltrans, that they don't have it. Do they have anything to do with the Gualala Arts overflow parking?
No,
No.
that the Gualala Arts overflow parking is solidly on the Millband property. And when we first started this, like John alluded to, the 2017 forum, when it happened, one of the big issues for a lot of people in the room was, hey, yeah, we should grab that property. Gualala Arts needs it to do their big events like Arts in the Redwoods, etc. So that parking is, will be maintained. And we solidly put it into our grant proposals. So the funders that agreed to give us funding, they know we want to leave that area for parking. It will look prettier. Right now it's an open field with a few eucalyptus trees in it. For those of you that remember it, it will look more similar to Gualala Arts parking today, with it being, naturally landscaped with conifer trees. That's probably where ultimately it will go. Right now it is an open field, and will be that way for a while.
But it won't be paved, will it?
Oh, it actually cannot be paved. Part of a conservation, and we found this during one of the grant tours, it all has to be permeable paving so that all of the rainwater, etc., can flow back into the earth.
Okay, so far that's it. Those are all the questions and comments.
Joel, what was the largest number of viewers we reached tonight while we were speaking?
We were up to 106 at one point.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.